towards the end, we can unmute ourselves, have a little back and forth, but really just kind of excited to share with you guys and really kind of talk about something I'm really passionate about and have been for a great deal of time. And that's, talking about preparing for the coaching interview and really getting yourself prepared to put your best foot forward and be able to talk about yourself as a leader and as a coach and with the culture that you want to build with either your group of players or with your team. So like I said, guys, feel free, please, to share any questions or chats as we kind of go through. Happy to kind of jump in and take any tangents that come up as we begin. So my name is Evan Burk. I am an executive leadership coach. Before this, I was a NFL and college football coach for 12 years. And since leaving college football, coaching college football in the NFL, I then started working in the performance consulting world, first with Fortune 500 companies, and then progressing on to working with esports teams, both in college and in the professional ranks. And I also work with executive, president, and CEO clients as well. You guys can be in touch with me on social media at Coach Evan Burk. Primarily, I'm on Twitter and Instagram. And also you can reach me over email, evan@coachevanburk.com. So I'm just going to outline a little bit of my journey before we get started, just so you guys understand kind of my history, where I'm coming from, and kind of why I'm doing this. So my coaching career really started around 2003 when I was still a student at University of Colorado. I started coaching fourth grade football at the rec center there in Boulder. I progressed to coaching at Fairview High School, which is one of the high schools in Boulder. Upon graduation, I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to coach at SMU in Dallas, Texas, where I am from. So got to spend 4 years at SMU. I then progressed to coaching at the Miami Dolphins, McMurray University, which was in the phase of going from a Division III to a Division II team, and then also coaching quarterbacks at UCLA before I left coaching in 2016. So was really fortunate in my coaching career really to have my hands at every division level, every type of player imaginable in football. And as I said, I progressed to working with some Fortune 500 companies, and then progressed to working with some professional and college esports clients. And recently, I was helping some NFL coaches really prepare their coaching portfolios, their resource libraries, and really helping them prepare for interviews for the off season. And this is really kind of where this idea started to help coaches. I obviously have a long history as a coach and have been a coach for the last 17 years. So it's something I'm super passionate about, and I was passionate about during my coaching career. And this is really kind of the next phase in terms of my consulting that I want to do, which is kind of progressing from helping executives to more sports leadership and sports coaches. So really kind of today, what the goal is to build a foundation, right? Like there's so much when it comes to the interview process that we can get into that, it would just be impossible to touch on everything. And despite the length of this slideshow, I'm going to try and get it done here in the next 50 minutes, but really just building a foundation and touching on networking, the preparation of the interview, the actual interview itself, and really some steps that we can take post-interview. As I said, I'm definitely going to encourage you guys to engage and ask questions as we go along, even if it's not something I can get to in the moment. I'm happy to kind of jump in at the end and have a little question and answer, because I think sometimes I can go through stuff, or anybody can go through stuff, but it really helps to hear from you guys and what you guys are experiencing, and really where I can provide the guidance and the help potentially with any of that. So going to touch on networking. I'm very passionate about this. Just to give a little context, when I started my coaching career, I knew nobody. I didn't play in college. I didn't have any family members that were college football players, and I don't have a dad that's an NFL executive. So I really started without a network and had to build my network up. And for anybody on this call that isn't familiar with this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, I would highly recommend it. It's the one book that if I could go back in time to when I was 19 years old, starting my coaching career, this is the book that I would recommend to myself. So I just think everything in life is encompassed really within this book, and specifically to as it pertains to networking. So a couple of things that I'm just very passionate about, obviously being very honest and sincere in terms of appreciation. I'll touch on this in a little bit. But it's just a couple of points in this book that I've seen come to fruition for me that I just want to outline for you guys when it comes to networking. So I think a lot of times we think of networking and it's like all about contacts. Let me get as many contacts. Let me collect as many business cards as I can. And I really think that networking in the truest sense should be more about creating that connection with people, creating that genuine connection with the people you're trying to make connections with. So one of the things is being genuinely interested. And when it pertains to the professional esports team that I ended up working with in Los Angeles, this really started by me reaching out to every pro team executive, pro coach in that Los Angeles area. As you can imagine, a lot of cold emails, not a lot of response. The president of the Los Angeles Gladiators, which is one of the Overwatch teams in Blizzard's Overwatch League, agreed to meet me for coffee. And I was just genuinely interested in learning about esports. I had spent my whole career for 12 plus years coaching NFL and college football. I didn't really know about esports. And that meeting was really me not trying to get a job, but really trying to learn about esports and trying to learn about that world. Did my background fit into that world? In that meeting, that genuine interest of that meeting directly led to me 6 months later getting a contract to work with that Los Angeles Gladiators team. And that all started with my genuine interest. I wasn't genuinely interested in getting a job, although that was a long-term goal, but I was genuinely interested in learning. And I think that president could sense that authenticity in that first meeting. Another point here in this book that they talk about is other people's interest. So I was fortunate to have a friend that worked at UCLA. And during one of my spring breaks, when I was coaching at McMurray in Abilene, Texas, I made the trip out to LA for spring break, specifically because I wanted to meet the offensive coordinator that was working at UCLA. His name was Noel Mazzoni. I had really looked up to him. I had followed him for a long period of time, and I wanted to interview him. I was able through my friend to set up a little 30-minute meeting. I was ultra prepared. I had 4 pages of questions I wanted to ask this coach. I walk into the meeting and I sit down, and the first thing that he says is, "Hey, you work for Hal Mummy at McMurray? Oh, that's interesting. Hey, what do you guys run in the red zone?" Wait, no, coach, I have 4 pages of questions I have to ask you. No, he wanted to learn about what I was doing. And so I ended up getting up on the board for about 45 minutes. And he was just, "What do you guys do versus blitz? Okay, what happens if they double the X receiver on this?" And really, it just turned into a pseudo interview, but I was prepared to really kind of feed his interest, right? I wasn't there going to say time out, coach. I want to know what your attitude is when you go into a game for play calling. That could wait, right? I was trying to connect with him. And so I definitely wanted to kind of feed his interests. That meeting, it didn't happen overnight, but 12 months later, I was offered an opportunity to join the UCLA coaching staff. Also, making other people feel important. When I was at UCLA, after I had joined that coaching staff, Mike Loxley, who at the time was, I think, coaching at Maryland, he had previously coached at University of Illinois. And I knew a really good friend of mine that I had worked with at the Dolphins who worked at Illinois. And so in the meeting room, I said, "Oh, hey, do you know this guy?" "Oh, you do? Okay, wow, that's really cool," whatever. It was all of 30 seconds. But when that meeting was over, I walked outside. I called my buddy, who at the time was working for the Chicago Bears. I got his voicemail. I just said, "Hey, just thinking of you, man. Mike Loxley was sitting in my office a moment ago and, mentioned your name, and just thinking of you, bro. Hope all is well." 3 weeks later, he calls me up, and I ended up flying out to Chicago to interview for his job because he was leaving for another opportunity. And so, just like when it comes to networking, I really truly believe that this is one of the best books when it comes to how to live your life and dealing with people. So I highly recommend that. And I just want to kind of paint the picture of kind of how, despite not having much of a network, I was able to do that through that genuine interest of learning about these other people and really making them feel important. So obviously right now, 2020, it's a little different, but I think you can still do social networking at a distance. You obviously have the people that are within your network. You definitely want to check in with them, even if it's just a voicemail, like to my guy that was in Chicago. You don't even need to call me back, man. Just checking on you, wanted to let you know I was thinking of you. You never know where that type of stuff will lead. And then I think it's really easy right now to stay connected over social media. I have a lot of people who I don't even have their numbers, but I'm connected to them on Instagram, on Twitter, and I'll have a routine back and forth with them every 3 to 6 months. It's a great way to stay connected with people that you know or have come in contact with in your career. Also, connecting with people that you don't know. This is incredibly important. Like I was just saying about Noel Mazzoni at UCLA, who I had no contact with or no connection to before I flew out there to meet him on that spring break. So I think, much like I didn't know him. I probably couldn't have gotten a meeting, but I used my friend that was working there and was able to get an introduction through your network. I think is a great way to connect with people, especially if you know who you're trying to connect with. You obviously have cold outreach. It is a little tougher, as we're all well aware. And then I would also encourage you guys, whether you're at a high school or a college, or maybe you guys are coaching at pro, regardless of what your situation is, there's people around you, number one, that you can learn from. And number two, you don't know what type of effect they have either on your current situation or on your future situation. And if anybody's familiar with the coach that they just hired at Vanderbilt, he used to play there. And this is an article from the Athletic from like 3 days ago. And they're talking in here. You can see this quote here at the bottom. Another important factor in the hiring of this guy was that he was very close with the baseball coach. Right. And he had obviously had that relationship for a long period of time. And it turns out this baseball coach was involved in the search. Right. And so if I could go back and kind of talk to myself when I was working at UCLA or SMU, it would be to take advantage of the great coaches that are around you. Yeah, because potentially they help you in the future. But quite honestly, because I could have learned a ton. The gymnastics coach at UCLA was like an all-time great. I should have sat in her office a lot more than I did and picked her brain about how she built her culture. Maybe it doesn't directly relate to esports or football, but there's little things that you can take from the people around you. So I would really encourage all of you to kind of take a step back and look at the situation that you're in and the people that you're surrounded by through a different lens, because there might be some great people to connect with that way. I would also encourage you guys to get creative. This is really big right now. Obviously, we can't meet in person. Handwritten letters, this has been really kind of the telltale sign of my career, and just keeping in touch with people and trying my best to separate myself without having much of a football background or a coaching background coming in to the business. When I got my job at the Miami Dolphins, I wrote 450 handwritten letters to every employee in the NFL, trying to get a meeting, trying to meet them for a beer at the Senior Bowl. Obviously I didn't have the network, but I had to create that. Those 450 letters ended up being 12 responses, what I would call legitimate responses. And 3 of those responses ended up leading to interviews. So you just never know what you're going to do to create those connections. And for me, I didn't have that built-in network. So handwritten letters was a great way. I would also encourage you guys, this is not a plug for me, but just, I know there's a lot of webinars and a lot of online workshops that are going on. I think following up, not only with the people that are attending these webinars, but also following up with the actual people that are presenting at the webinars or the workshops as well is an awesome way to connect. I can just tell you that I've done plenty of online webinars and nobody ever reaches out to you after the fact. So I can just tell you that you will be one of a few to reach out to those coaches. Hey coach, I saw you on the Texas High School Coaches Association webinar talking about your practice plan. That's really cool. I'd love to chat with you for 10 minutes and just pick your brain on why you decided to do things this way that you mentioned in the webinar. Guaranteed that would be a great way to connect with people. And again, it's the people that are attending the webinar, but it's also the people that are presenting. Not a lot of people follow up that way. Also, you could start a podcast, produce content online. All these things are great ways to be creative and potentially connect with people. And you might have to do a ton, right? You might have to write 450 letters to get 12 responses, but those are 12 people that now know that you exist. That is one or two people that present at a webinar that know you exist. And you just never know where these people in your network are going to end up really being incredibly beneficial and valuable to you in your job search moving forward. So I think another important thing when it comes to networking is when you make an ask is to be specific. I think one of the common faults that is made by especially younger coaches is they want to go to coaches they work with, or they want to just go to anybody and say, hey, I want a job. Oh, I want a job in college. Okay, well, I know a ton of different coaches, right? I know a head coach at Division III here in Texas. I know assistant coaches in the NFL. I know coaches that are in high school all over the country. What type of job do you want? If you just say, I want a job, that's not easy to differentiate how to help you. And to be quite honest, nobody is really going to care about your job search unless you can make it easy on them. So it makes it really easy to help you if you can go to them and say, hey, look, Evan, I'm looking for any Division II or Division III job, preferably in the South. Do you know anybody? Oh, yeah, actually, I have 3 people that come to mind when you say that. But if you were just to say, hey, Evan, do you know anybody that can help me get a college job? I'm like, I mean, maybe I don't really know. And I also don't have the bandwidth to deal with this, right? So make it easy on the people that you're going to make that ask, make it specific, because then it makes it easier for them to say, oh, you know what? My buddy Braxton, he'd be perfect to introduce you to. Okay. And it also helps you determine what to say to these people when you make that ask. Again, you don't want to reach out to these people over and over and over again. When you make that ask, you want it to be specific so that these people can help you. Okay, so let's talk about the preparation for the interview. Obviously, what we're all here for, what I'm really passionate about. If there's any of these things that kind of you guys have questions on, again, please feel free to stop me. But I think one of the important things is find your power stories. I cannot emphasize this enough. You're going to sit in front of somebody. You're going to try and get in front of them. What story are you going to tell? What makes you unique? Okay. So for me, I'm going to tell the 450 handwritten letter story, right? That's unique. Hey, this is how I got my job in the NFL. Hey, this is how I got my job in esports. I wrote, 100, cold DMs that nobody replied to except for the one president who ended up hiring me, right? What are your power stories? And so if you don't think you have any, think about the successes that you've had and try and create those power stories for yourself. When you get into the interview, this is what you're going to direct the conversation towards, right? We want it to highlight you in the best way possible. So I would encourage everybody in here, spend some time, prepare what your power stories are going to be. We all know what these are. You were faced with some adversity, you overcame that adversity, and then this happened, and then we won the championship, whatever, right? That's the story you're trying to get to in the interview. It should go without saying, but I just want to make a note. Research the people in the schools and the team that you're going to interview with, in particular the coaches, because I think when you get in front of those coaches, you don't want to look silly if you say something like, oh, wait, were you at the University of Illinois? I can't remember. No, you should know. Hey, you were at University of Illinois. Did you know Joe? Oh, yeah, I thought you guys might know each other. Yeah, Joe's great. Awesome. You want to come prepared with that information, and you don't have to make it say like, oh, hey, I did 9 hours of research on you, and I know you worked at University of Illinois. You just say it very casually. Hey, I think you might know my friend, Jonathan. He also was at University of Illinois. Oh yeah, of course, Jonathan. Okay. But it just shows that you've done your research. You're ready to go. Prepare to sell yourself. Again, it's the same as the power stories. How are you going to do this? What stories are you going to tell that's going to separate you in that interview process? I think also asking great questions not only engages the interviewer, but shows that you're a little different, right? Like you're not in here saying, oh, okay, well, how many points are you trying to score next year? No. Hey, coach, how did you build the culture? Okay, you've gotten us to this point. We've won 7 or 8 games the last 3 years. How are we going to take the next step and win a championship? What are those great questions that you're going to ask? And then be prepared to talk about yourself and your philosophy concisely. You don't want to ramble. You don't want to get in there and spend 40 minutes on the story of how you went from coaching 4th grade football to UCLA. You want to get in there. You want to tell that story succinctly. And then if you need to, you can plant little seeds about things that you did and come back to them later, or maybe just create a little bit of intrigue with your interviewer. Oh, hey, you said you did a handwritten letter writing campaign. What does that mean? Oh, I'm glad you asked. I'm ready to talk about that. So just a real quick, when we're talking about great questions, I think that thinking of it in terms of curiosity and interest from that person, right? So like, what do you genuinely want to know going into this interview, right? Essentially, it is a two-way interview. Yes, you probably want this job more than likely, but also you're trying to assess whether this is going to be a great situation for you as well. What information do you need to be able to say that? And I think that those are all really important things as we kind of go through the process. So I think a couple of things just to kind of like maybe give you some context of what I think are great questions. Why is this job open? So, that might be, they had the, 92nd worst pass defense in America. Okay, well, that's fine, but I want to know why you fired this person. Like, why is this job open? Challenge them, make them tell you that. What did the last person struggle with? Obviously, kind of tied to that last question, but you want to know what challenges are you about to step into in this new role? I think always asking about the culture of the team is important. And then also, kind of like I alluded to a moment ago, what does this team need to do to take the next step? So it seems like there's talented players here, but is it the scheme that's not matching up? Is that why the pass defense isn't ranked very high? Or what do you think needs to happen? Right. And then that lets you kind of maybe lead into, okay, why do you think I'm the best person to come in here and change the culture in the DB's room? Something else that I'm really very interested in is like creating your interview binder or your pitch deck, right? So this is the interview binder that I had like created throughout my coaching career. And there's like all sorts of tabs in here: interview, program vision, staff meetings, academics, official visits, unofficial visits, all the way down to coaches' wives and fundraising, right? So it was like everything in my career I kept in this binder. And so what are you going to walk into that interview with to show them that you're the best candidate, to show them that you're ready to not only like dominate this interview, but you're going to dominate from day one when you go into this job? And my idea was always to walk in with a binder like this that's like kind of like obnoxiously big and like drop it on the table and just be like, I'm going to go through this page by page until you stop the interview. Now, maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe that's not your style, but I think having something like this is incredibly powerful. If you guys know about Tom Coughlin, when he interviewed for the New York Giants job, he had what Ernie Accorsi, the general manager at the time, entitled the Magna Carta. And it was a 30-page document that Tom Coughlin had that outlined everything that was wrong with the New York Giants football team and exactly why he was the best person to be the head coach and what the plan was. And again, he was trying to answer every single question before it was asked. Now, ask yourselves this. Am I answering every single question before it's asked in this? Well, you probably have a couple. You're either thinking like, oh my God, that's insane. Like you're crazy. Or like you just look at it and you're like, oh my God, I'm sure every answer is in there. Right. So it's like, what does that say about me if I show up to this interview with something like that? So for me, it was a huge binder. For you, it might be something similar to a pitch deck or similar to Tom Coughlin's Magna Carta. But I think something that you have that's put a little bit of thought into the job that you're about to step into, I think can be incredibly powerful. And then also, this is in line with kind of the work I was doing with some of these NFL assistant coaches, right? Like I was preparing their interview binder for them. I was preparing a digital library for them. And these are things that you can do too. So you can kind of see here in these two screenshots, I've got like an Evan Burk portfolio that details everything I did in my coaching career or that I was going to do when I became a head coach. And then I've got like all my offensive stuff from 4-minute offense to third down passing, to air raid, to red zone, everything, right? So that's all in what Evernote, if you guys are familiar, it's like an online note-taking system. And everything in my career is in that Evernote. So, find a way that you can organize this, because if you look around, especially in the NFL, and this is true in college and in high school, if you walk in and you're just kind of talking, and even if I have the best references, okay, that's fine. But what happens if I walk in the interview after you and I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, you want to talk about what the coaches' wives are going to be doing? Boom, let's go in here. Okay, I've got 16 notes that I've already like pre-planned that these are the things that we're going to do with the coaches' wives. Oh, how am I going to hire people? I've thought about all of this. So much of football and really sports in general now is about presentation. Look at all the young coaches that are being hired right now. Now, yeah, it's like, oh, they worked for Sean McVay for 6 months. So they should be the head coach of, the new, the Jacksonville Jaguars or whatever. But aside from that, it's all young coaches, right? So like, what's up with all the old coaches? Are they just rolling in there like they have been for, the last 25 years and just chatting? I guarantee you these young guys are organized and they walk in and they're ready to go from the drop. And they've got it prepared with presentations and everything. Everything is about presentation nowadays. So when we talk about the interview, I think it's best to just outline the interviews that I've seen, in particular with the NFL. And then I'll walk through a couple of questions. There's not enough time to address all these questions, but if you see any that kind of like, interests you, like feel free to just give me a holler. So understand one thing, that the interview starts the moment you walk out the door. So if you are fortunate enough to interview with an NFL team, they're probably going to fly you out to that location. And the moment you walk out of your apartment and get on that plane, the interview is on. You don't know what the situation is. You don't know who that limo driver is that's picking you up, or whatever is set up for you. They could be working for that team. So understand that the interview starts the moment you walk out the door. And really your game plan is be confident, be concise, and be diplomatic. Okay. If you can do those three things, you're going to do really well in your interview. So the potential structure of the interview is you're going to show up at the actual place, and anyone can be the owner. Again, I've heard stories of owners or maybe somebody that's very high up actually posing as the front desk person. So they're the first person that you come in contact with when you walk in the door. You don't know this because you didn't research who the head of HR is, or you didn't research the VP of general counsel. You're researching coaches. But the moment you walk in that door and you start talking to people, everybody knows who you are. So like in an NFL organization, like if they're interviewing people for a job, they're bringing everybody in probably like in little 40-minute increments throughout like a 4 or 5 hour period of the day, and everybody in the building is aware of what's happening. Everybody is aware that those people are in the building to interview. So understand, everybody knows that you're there to interview, and anybody that you're talking to can be the owner or have a tremendous influence on your interview. Typically, when you actually get to the interview part, whether you're talking to HR or maybe you're talking to the person who you could be potentially replacing, or another or part of the coaching staff or the head coach, it's going to take a general structure like this. You're going to obviously walk in, introduce yourself. Maybe you know this person. There's going to be a bit of building rapport. How was your flight? Oh my gosh, yeah, it can be tough sometimes. Yeah, it's cold here in Chicago. Wow. Okay, cool. Hey, so here's what we're going to do, Benny. We're going to talk a little bit just about our philosophies, and then I want to go introduce you to the coaching staff. I want you to talk to them and spend some time with them, and then we're going to have lunch, and then we're going to get you on the computer, and they're going to set the agenda for you. And then they're going to transition probably directly into that meeting. Now, this is typical, but this doesn't mean that that's the way it's going to be. I have my own personal philosophy called the Chuck Jarvie effect. And essentially, I showed up for a meeting at one point with Chuck Jarvie that I thought was going to be a friendly meeting, and it was not that. It was very confrontational, and it was a very tough interview. And so I would just recommend that prepare yourself for it to be very, very tough. And if it's anything other than that, then you know you've over prepared and you're going to be good. And then my other thing is get to the point, which I'm trying to do. But again, just trying to give you guys a lot of information. But when you're in that interview, make sure everything is concise and to the point. So here are the first couple of questions that you need to be prepared for. Tell me about yourself, right? Very typical, very easy interview question, but it's actually a lot more difficult than it seems, right? What you want to do is you want to have a confident and concise answer. You don't want to have a 4-minute answer. So think about, how do you talk about yourself? How long should this be? I saw something on Twitter the other day, some guy talking about, hey, look, don't be long-winded, be as short as you can. And I like that advice. So for me, kind of like the thing that I've adopted over the last couple of years has been, hey, I'm Evan Burk. I was an NFL and college football coach for 12 years. After that, I transitioned to working with companies and esports teams. And now I work with sports leaders and executives on leadership development and interview preparation. Right. So it's like, I've said that countless times, and that's my little 30-second pitch for myself. Obviously, if anybody wants to dig in deeper, they can, but they probably don't want to listen to any more than that. Okay. So just be prepared to talk about yourself. And it can be longer, but I always like to give them kind of like the short intro version. And then if they're like, oh, okay, so you also coached esports, tell me about that. You're more than ready to talk about that. Okay, so when we're talking about coaching philosophy, this is also another potential first question that you could be asked. This is probably more in line with like a head coaching interview. But if it turns out to be super intense, there is going to be no building rapport. There is no time to sit here and talk about the weather. John Mara and Ernie Accorsi are sitting here, and they're going to bring in, Bill Belichick in 2 hours. And so we don't have time to sit here and talk about the weather. It's time to get after it. So, hey, yeah, Evan, take a seat. Walk us through your philosophy. And one of the keys to a question like this is like, do you know what you stand for? What do you stand for? How are you going to tell somebody that's interviewing you, and how are you going to do it in a very concise way and that's easy to understand, right? Because again, you're going to be there to teach players, potentially to teach whoever you are going to be leading. And you need to be prepared to have the people that you interview with understand exactly where you're coming from, right? So there's no uncertainty. You can't sit there and say, well, it depends. If I was going to have a college job, it would probably be based on this. But, if I were to be an NFL coach, I would probably base my philosophy. No, nobody wants to hear that. That sounds very wishy-washy. You want no uncertainty. So everything that you talk about is 100% positive, and you are certain about it and you're confident about it. This is also a strong foundation for how you lead. So this is a great question just in general. If I were going to break down, where should you start with your interview prep or your interview binder? This is where you start. What is your vision? What is your philosophy? What is leadership to you? Does your leadership style differ whether you're on the field or off the field? These are important questions just to ask yourself, challenge yourself in this respect, because I think it does kind of lead down this road of helping you understand better of who you are, what your philosophy stands for. And then when you are in that interview setting, it's easier for you to answer those questions. I'm just going to kind of hit a couple of different sections to be prepared to talk about in the interview. Dealing with players, right? How do you build those relationships? How do you develop players? How do you take a player that's pretty good and take him to being great? Have you done that before? Give me examples of a challenging player that you've dealt with, and how you overcame that challenge in dealing with that person. These are really important questions, right? They get to the core of you as a coach. And I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't start to dig into a lot of this stuff until the end of my coaching career, like until after I left, right? I didn't understand the value of like having an internal North Star or core values that drove everything that I'm bringing to you guys. So, I think they're incredibly beneficial. How are you going to motivate and inspire players? That's going to be a huge question in the interview process. The higher up you go, how are we going to entrust you with leading these 15 to 20 young adults, and how are you going to connect with them? And so I think that's a really important thing for you to answer within yourself. And then how do you create accountability with your group? Is it through the environment? Is it through your core values? Are you just gonna tell somebody that that's not acceptable? How do you discipline your players? These are all really important things to consider and be prepared to talk about. And then, I know I saw when most of you guys filled out, it's mostly football coaches in here. So I'll just talk about this, but this can be for any, general sport knowledge. Like, what tactical things do you think are most fundamental to doing your job? I asked an NFL assistant coach kind of like what those interviews look like. Like, what are you going to get asked on an assistant coach interview in the NFL? And these were a couple of things that he said. What's your favorite play on 3rd and 2? What are you going to do versus press man? What are you going to do versus cover 2 on that 3rd and 2 play? Right? Hey, draw that up here. Okay, cool. Go on with the interview. 30 minutes later, hey, Benny, draw up that 3rd and 2 play again. Right? They're going to put you under that pressure, and they're going to see what your knowledge really is. I think another important thing is think about your teaching style. How do you teach? How are you going to tell me that you teach, right? You only have 30 minutes of time, 30 minutes of classroom time. How are you going to watch your film? What types of things are you going to focus on? Are you going to watch individual drill? Are you going to watch 7-on-7? What do you prioritize? What if you only have 10 minutes? Thinking about how you're going to teach fundamentals, like how do you teach the go route? You need to be prepared to answer that question. How do you teach a kid to get off press? Or do you just tell him, hey, get off press? Or do you tell him, hey, beat them with your feet, beat them with your hands, hand over, whatever your technique is. How are you going to explain that in the interview? These are all football or general sport knowledge, and it's all about fundamentals, and it's all about how you teach the game and how do you teach the people around you. And I think oftentimes in coaching, it's all about coaching, right? It's about strategy. It's about figuring out what plays we're going to call. And I didn't see a lot of emphasis put on the teaching aspect in my career. And I think this is incredibly vital when we're talking about coaching. I won't spend a lot of time on this, just HR questions that I've been asked in the past. How do you react when you're stressed out? How did you deal with previous obstacles and adversity? I interviewed for a job that was an administrative role in the NFL. So it was like, hey, this is an administrative role. You've been a coach your whole career. What makes you think you're prepared for this? How do you answer that question with confidence? Understanding the whole situation that you're walking into. Hey, I'm a coach and you're interviewing me for an administrative role. Well, I'm here. You guys saw my resume. Why are you interviewing me for an administrative role? Like, I'm going to dominate regardless of what the role is, but I'm asking you guys, how are you going to keep me occupied with this administrative role? Right. So, thinking about how you're going to deal with these questions when they're asked. And another one, and this is just kind of like my own nerddom, like, tell me something that you learned recently. Like, how do you separate yourself when asked a question like this? Oh, yeah, I've really been reading a lot about the Stanford women's basketball coach. She's really impressive, and this is what I learned: A, B, and C. Or are you going to say, oh, yeah, I read Bill Walsh's book again? Oh, that book? Oh, no, I already read that book. I read his other book. Okay. And I'm a huge Bill Walsh fan. I'm just saying, like, are you going to bring a differing perspective to that coaching staff? What else do you bring to the table? So this is kind of taken from some conversations I've had with head coaches in interview experiences. So obviously they can be a little more intense. These situations that I was in were a little more laid back, right? And maybe that had to do with the head coaches I spoke with. But it was more kind of like, hey, tell me about your friendship with this person that you connected with that got you into this job. A really big thing that I really like talking about, and I was fortunate because I was prepared for this, is like, hey, you worked under Coach Smith. Talk about Coach Smith's leadership style. Now, are you going to get up there and say, well, yeah, he just holds guys accountable. It's really great. Or are you going to talk about little things that shows your attention to detail? Oh, yeah, coach, it might seem like overkill, but coach so-and-so always wants all of the Coke and Sprite bottles facing the exact same way when you walk in the room. And so it's that level of attention to detail that he has in his program, right? How are you going to highlight this in the interview process? Tell me about the music that's played at the practices. Describe how these coaches built culture in the locker room. Those can be tough questions to ask in a very intense interview setting. So, how much time have you thought about what you've learned from previous experiences that you've had, and how can you sell those experiences as to being incredibly valuable when you're sitting there with a head coach or with anybody else in the interview process? And I said a moment ago about being confident, concise, and diplomatic. And this is where I think the diplomatic piece comes in, right? We've all been on staffs that maybe didn't perform at the highest level or maybe didn't have the greatest leadership. How are you going to answer those questions? Oh, hey, Evan, like, you were on this team. I think they were the worst team in college football that year. What happened? Oh, well, we just had to, we had to get some really talented guys in the program, and we could, obviously you can't do it overnight, and we had to gradually, have small wins that accumulated, and et cetera, et cetera. Are you going to be prepared to talk about that? And I think those are really great things to think about, because what you don't want to do is get in that situation and say, oh yeah, Coach Smith totally screwed that up. Like, he didn't pay any attention to recruiting, and we had no direction. And thank God I got to stay on after this other coach came, because whatever. Okay, well, you don't even know, but that other coach and Coach Smith are friends, right? So we don't even want to get into that situation. Everything we do is diplomatic. Everything we do is positive. So just a couple of things that I took from Pete Carroll, going back to coaching philosophy. Can you explain it in 25 words or less? Right? How simply and clearly do you communicate your philosophy, and how simply and clearly do you communicate in general as a coach? Are you able to explain your coaching philosophy in 25 words or less? That's very challenging, but it's a great challenge if you guys can take that on and kind of distill all of your core values into a coaching philosophy that succinctly. And then also, I like this one that Pete Carroll asks his assistants: why should you climb the next rung of the coaching ladder? So it's obviously a great question to ask because it's very challenging, right? Like, this is the selling yourself part. Like, why should I promote you? You've been the assistant DBs coach for 3 years. And what have you showed me in the last 3 years that warrants you being the full-time DBs coach? So I think like that's a great question for you to answer. That's a tough question. What have you done over the last couple of years? Maybe you haven't done anything. Okay, well, like, how are you going to sell that to Pete Carroll? How are you going to sell that to whoever you're going to go interview with? So I think that's a great thing to challenge all of you with, is like, what have you done to deserve the next rung in the coaching ladder? And thinking about that and having an answer, and not saying, hey, I've been here for 4 years. Okay, so you've been here? Are you treading water? Or have you been practicing ongoing learning and now you're prepared not only to take over the DBs, but you're prepared to take over a whole defense, right? So it's like having that confidence to answer that question and knowing why you deserve to get that promotion. Okay, so closing the interview. I didn't learn this until I went and worked for a corporate sales company, but closing the interview, closing for next steps. And maybe some of you are fortunate enough to have a coach that has taught you this in recruiting or whatever, but we always, ABC, always be closing, right? We always are trying to close. So that interview is coming to the end. Typically, you've maybe asked your couple of great questions. How'd you build this culture? What did coach so-and-so do that was not successful here the last couple of years? Okay, great. Yeah. Do you have any other questions, Evan? Yeah, just a couple more. First of all, I really appreciate being here today. This has been a fantastic experience. I've just enjoyed meeting everybody here, and really excited about this opportunity. Do you have any hesitations about moving me forward in the interview process? So this is a little bit of a challenging question, right? Like, you're putting it on them. Hey, I've been here for an hour. I've been here for 5 hours. I've had lunch with you guys. Like, I've sat in the room and talked ball. Do you have any hesitations in moving me forward? This is really a way for you to have any objections that they have. Hopefully they'll be honest with you, voice these objections. And it gives you like one more chance to overcome them. Yeah, Evan, you haven't coordinated a defense before. So like, we're kind of hesitant because you haven't coordinated a defense yet. So just being honest with you, you're friends with Jamani. So I just wanted to kind of like be straight up with you, but that's kind of the concern we have. Yeah, well, listen, I totally understand that. And, at some point every coach has to take a leap of faith with an assistant coach and give them that opportunity. I know I've earned that opportunity. And let me explain just one more time. And this is where you kind of go back, you hit your 2 or 3 points. I've done this, I've learned under this coach. I've seen it happen again and again and again. And listen, we're going to start simple. We're going to get really great at the basics and we're going to slowly build it out. And I know that this works because I've seen it work here and I've seen it work here. So I understand your reservations and I appreciate you bringing them up to me, but I am so confident. I have the utmost confidence that I can succeed as a defensive coordinator here. Right. So having that confidence and whatever those objections are, and you're going to have a good idea of what they are going into your interview, being prepared to address those, and then confirming next steps. Okay, Evan, appreciate you sharing that. Like, we will be in touch with you. Okay, so just to confirm, like, am I going to hear from you or am I going to hear from your assistant, Sally? Okay, I'm going to hear from Sally by Thursday. Okay, great. If I don't hear from Sally by Thursday, I'm just going to shoot her an email on Friday morning. But yeah, I really appreciate it, Coach. And thank you so much. I'll definitely be following up with you. Thank you for the opportunity, right? Confirm what those next steps are. So like, if you don't hear from Sally on Thursday, like, you're emailing her and you've already told the coach that like this is happening. So there's none of this like, oh man, like, should I call him? Should I text him? Is that too much? Like, I don't know what to do. No, you're confirming those next steps before you leave. Okay, so I'm coming to the end of my time and I don't want to keep going on and on. I will hang around here for a couple more minutes if there are other things that you guys want to jump into. But just a couple of things about the post interview. I would really encourage everybody here to do an after action report. And basically, this is the after action report I did with the Chicago Bears. I wrote this out on the flight back from Chicago to LA, right? I wrote down everything, every question that was asked of me, everything that was positive, everything that was negative, everything that I felt I need to improve on. I mean, I've even got something in here where it's like, I drank 1 cup of coffee and I wasn't like too jittery, right? Or my dress shirt didn't fit well, right? So like evaluate everything in that performance. Why? Because you want to go back to that. You want to know exactly what was asked by all those coaches so that you can continue to learn. You can continue to improve, just like we do with our game film with our players. Everybody should be following up. I personally follow up with a handwritten letter. I've talked about the Chicago interview a ton, and like these were the letters I wrote, right? And this was like the day I got back. Just kind of like giving myself another opportunity to stand out. What am I saying? You're just showing appreciation. You're reflecting on your time that you spent there. You're excited. You're showing that anticipation for the upcoming steps and the potential to work with them. And then you're talking about next steps. Hey, I really look forward to hearing from you in the next week. Right. And then it just gives you an opportunity to make an impact, right? Like one of these notes, I met with one of the part owners with an NFL team. Okay, you think I'm just gonna like shoot that guy a text and say, "Hey, thanks for breakfast the other day"? Absolutely not. I'm gonna write that guy a handwritten letter, and as you can see, it's nothing intense, it's nothing too much, but it's just a nice touch to follow up and just set myself apart and make an impact. And kind of going back to what I talked about first of all, like showing that genuine interest and showing that appreciation. So next steps for all of you guys, I would encourage everybody, build your coaching portfolio. Always be working on your ongoing skill and technique development. I think one of the underestimated pieces in all of this is having an honest assessment of yourself. What do you need to get better at? I really want to be a coach at the NFL level bad, but do I want it to do it bad enough to like write 450 handwritten letters? Like that sounds like a lot. I don't know, right? Like you need to be honest with yourself. What are you willing to do? And what areas do you need to improve on? Are you prepared to step into a room and talk to somebody about your philosophy uninterrupted for 3 minutes or 3 hours? I think always building your network, just reconnecting with the people that are in your network and always continuing to expand and learn from other coaches, even outside of your sport. And then confidence comes from preparation, right? Like I feel super confident that I can talk about this because I've spent my entire career preparing to be the head coach at the University of Colorado. That was like my North Star for my entire career. So like I've spent my whole career preparing for that. I have binders and binders to prove it. Right. And so it's like my confidence comes from that. And so, for you guys, develop that confidence. That's going to come from the preparation. And I love, Finney Office fans in here, am I ready for this interview? Or is this interview ready for me? So I love just kind of like flipping that on its head. So wow, that was a lot. That's a lot of me. So if there are any questions, I would love to hear from anybody. I know we're kind of coming up here on our hour time. And so I really hope that this was beneficial and informational and valuable for you guys, right? Like I was trying to put myself in the shoes that I was in maybe 5-6 years ago and kind of like what I didn't know and what I wish I knew. So if there are any other questions that you guys have, I'd love to answer them. I know that was a lot. I'm happy to forward this recording to you guys afterwards. And if you guys have any other topics like this in line with leadership development or continuing on this interview preparation line of thinking and topics, please feel free to share them here. I'd love to hear from you guys and provide that type of value to you. I'm going to be doing other workshops and other resources are going to be coming out. So I'll definitely keep you guys in touch and up to date with that. And please feel free to stay in contact with me. So I'll stop here. If there are any questions, please feel free to shoot them in the chat box. And, we're pretty pretty intimate group here tonight. So please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions if there are any.
I think this is probably more just for me, and I know Coach Brown as well. We've already done the minority internship through Bill Walsh. And then now we're in this space now. It's like, okay, now that we've done this and we didn't get a chance to actually do it at the facility this year because of the COVID, but now we're in this space now between the end of the season into, the off season. I think I'm trying to figure out what do I need to do to prepare myself for the spring, for next year, to help myself each day or each week or whatever it may be.
Yeah. So just
I know
real
it's a
quick,
loaded question.
Yeah. So real quick, Joe, like when you say that, like, are you talking about like trying to get a job in the next 6 months? Are you talking about trying to eventually get a certain type of job? Like, what is the aim?
Yeah. So my aim is to get an entry level job in the NFL. So in the next 6 months.
Okay, got it. So I'll just share with you kind of like my own personal experience, and maybe this will kind of paint a good picture. So it was December 15th, 2009, when I was told at SMU that they had already hired my replacement and that I wasn't going to be coming back. And essentially the day that I made the decision that I was like, oh, you know what? Like, I'm going to go all in and I'm going to try and make it to the NFL. And how am I going to do that? I don't know, but I think I'm going to make a spreadsheet of every employee in the NFL and see where I know people, or not where I know people, but where my connections, where my network knows people. And I'm going to do this handwritten letter writing campaign. That was starting in December. So I did that all leading up to the Senior Bowl. I know things are a little different this year, but let's just like take COVID out of it. I was preparing for the Senior Bowl, right? So every letter I was writing was like, hey, I'd love to connect with you at the Senior Bowl. And then I was kind of planning that after the Senior Bowl, I was going to send out a bunch of like typed cover letters, but all my cover letters were going to be specific to different jobs. Like, I wasn't going to send the same cover letter for a player personnel entry level job as I was for a entry level job, with scouting, right? Each one was going to be tailored to that specific job. So then I knew that was going to be sent out at the end of February. And then I knew that I kind of had like a 4 to 5 month horizon or a timeline. And then if I got to the end of that timeline, I was going to start looking for a college job, right? So I think right now is a great time to kind of like check in with your people. And you said it, like, that you want like an entry level job. Let those people know that are like in your network that that's what you're looking for, because they're the people that can help you. And then while you're telling them about that, kind of like have your own creative way that you're trying to get in front of them. So, me personally, I would probably be trying to do some type of like an analytics or kind of like a look at something specific to a team, right? So if like I had a connection with a certain team, I would probably try and do like an end of season evaluation of like explosive plays or, something like that I could like send to them and like prove my value, or just kind of like do kind of like an unasked apprenticeship. And at the same time, like letting them know, like, hey, this is really interesting. Games where you guys, had less than 3, explosive runs on offense, like you guys lost 0 of 7 games or something like that, right? Or you guys lost 7 of 7 games, but on games where you had, over 4 explosives in the run game, you guys are undefeated, whatever it is. Now, some teams may have that stuff. Other teams don't have that stuff, right? It's hard to know, but I would be trying to do something like that. And at the same time, telling the people that you know exactly what your desired job is.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. So I know we're kind of like at 9:03 Central Time. I really appreciate everybody for joining tonight. And please feel free to stay in contact with me. And if you guys do have other topics that you'd like to see, please let me know too, because I'm going to be kind of doing a lot more work in this space. And would love to kind of hear from you guys and what would be of most interest. I'm going to stick around here for a couple of minutes. I'll kind of like end the workshop here now, but I'll stick around for a couple of minutes if anybody does have any other questions or just want to chat offline. But thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. Everybody stay safe and have a happy holiday season, and look forward to chatting with you guys soon. What's up, Joe? How you doing, man?
Pretty good, man. Just taking it all in, man. Some really good stuff, man.